Today, our guest is Brian Siegal. For 14 years, he has been director of the Miami and Broward Regional Office of the AJC, the American Jewish Committee. Brian is responsible for developing ties and working on policy issues with international leaders, as well as ethnic and religious government officials and community leaders. Brian is a life member and former term member in the Council on Foreign Relations and a Florida Advisor board member of the U.S. Global Leadership Coalition. Today, we will take a look at the AJC and the work it does. Welcome to Miami Global Net Podcast, where we discuss Miami's international relations. We will showcase Miami's international diplomatic and business landscape and get to know the innovative startups calling Miami home. Meet the people behind the organizations that contribute to Miami's commercial and cultural international growth. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, Alejandro. Happy to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. How's everything over there at the AJC?
You know, working hard, especially in this new environment in which we find ourselves in the middle of coronavirus. But the work doesn't stop, and so neither do we.
Yeah, same here, nonstop. And thanks to the technology, we can continue the work. So tell us a little bit about yourself. You are originally from...
I'm originally from Birmingham, Alabama, born and raised. And, you know, it's an interesting way to grow up, part of a small Jewish community in Birmingham, where, you know, you learn how both to stand up for yourself, but also to learn about others and to listen. And, you know, growing up in Birmingham, of course, you know, you learn a lot about the civil rights movement. You learn a lot about the history of that city. And, you know, I think for me, it really informed a lot of who I am and what I wanted to do with my life in terms of advocating on issues that are important to me.
From over there all the way down to South Florida, Miami, how did that come to be? How did you end up out here in Miami?
Sure. Yeah, it's a long, winding road. So from Birmingham, I went off to the University of Texas in Austin and spent my undergraduate years there. I had done a lot of work in Birmingham on racial and ethnic relations while I was in high school, and was really fortunate to participate in some programs, leadership programs. And so when I went to the University of Texas in Austin, I really jumped right into that work and also focused on that as my academic pursuit in terms of learning about racial and ethnic relations in the United States, which became my major through a humanities program, and really fell in love with Austin and with the University of Texas. Got very involved in student leadership groups and on campus, and ended up staying for another 3 years for law school at the University of Texas School of Law, which was also a great experience and really helped me even further learn how I could be an effective advocate, and also gave me some great opportunities. I was able to study for a semester in London at University College London and travel throughout Europe to really see and learn about different cultures and different countries and histories. And it really created a curiosity for me in terms of learning about other cultures and other countries.
Okay. And then you ended up here in Miami with the AJC always, or were you here before the AJC?
So I after my law school career, I practiced law in Dallas, Texas for a few years. And then I decided to go the route of international affairs and international law. I spent another few months in London doing a fellowship in the British legal system through the American Inns of Court. And that was fascinating, getting to work with British barristers and judges. And then my wife and I moved to Israel for a year. and she was studying for her first year out of 5 years in rabbinical school to become a rabbi. And I was doing a fellowship called the Dorot Fellowship, which selects a small number of North American Jews to work and study in Israel for a year in order to learn more about Israel. So I was fortunate and got to study at Hebrew University and take classes in international affairs. And I was able to work part of the time for an NGO, a non-governmental organization called the Israel Democracy Institute. And the other half of the year, I was able to clerk for the Chief Justice of the Israeli Supreme Court. So that was a tremendous experience and really opened my eyes to really some amazing things that were happening in Israel. It was also a time when the world was changing. And so you had, of course, in the United States, it was the time 2001, 2002. So it was 9/11 in the United States. And it was a lot of violence in Israel related to what was called the Second Intifada, an uprising, when there were tensions between Israelis and Palestinians and terror from certain factions within the Palestinian community. And so it really changed my mind in terms of what I wanted to do. I had been on this legal track and I realized I wanted to focus on issues of advocacy for Jewish community, for Israel, for democracy and human rights. So when my wife and I moved back to the United States after that year, we moved to New York and we spent 4 years in New York. And after another brief stint at a law firm in New York, I made the switch over to working for AJC in the New York office, which is our headquarters. And I was the assistant director for intergroup outreach, so reaching out to other ethnic and religious groups. And it was an amazing experience. I got to travel to Rome to meet with officials in the Catholic Church. I got to travel to Cape Town, South Africa, to help put on a conference for leaders in the Jewish community and Catholic Church in the Vatican on how religious voices can help in the battle against HIV/AIDS. It was really fascinating. And when my wife finished her rabbinic studies in New York, we looked around the country to see where we might want to go, and we discovered Miami. It was a great timing, both for her career and my career. And Miami was never on our radar screen. We didn't really have many friends or family here. We had a few of each of those, but hadn't really ever been here. And when we came down and visited, we realized a couple of things. Number one, it could be a great place to raise our kids. And we were in a 1-bedroom apartment in New York. So we were pretty much ready to leave Manhattan. And we also realized that Miami was really a unique place. It kind of combined the global city with lots of cultural opportunities, with somewhat of a feel of a small town, where my wife's from New Orleans, Louisiana, and I mentioned I'm from Birmingham, Alabama. And so it really was kind of a great combination of both of those things, where we felt we could have a community, and yet there would always be interesting people to meet and great conversations and important work to do. So that's what led us to Miami.
And you like it so far, I'm assuming? So you've been here for quite some time now, no?
Yeah, we've been down here for 14 years, and like everything, I think Miami is an acquired taste. It took me a few years to kind of get acclimated, but one of the things I always loved from the very beginning was that different from some of the other places I've lived, when I would reach out to people, leaders of this community, whether that means elected officials or corporate leaders or, leaders in the international affairs arena, academic, people were very open to taking a meeting, very busy, influential people. And yet they would have the meeting. And once they can determine, that you're someone who wants to do good things for this community and beyond, it's a place where doors open, as opposed to a lot of other places where doors close unless you have some sort of in. And so that was something I loved right away about Miami, was the willingness of people to take a chance on folks who are new to the community. And so it certainly took some adjustment, just getting used to Miami as a different kind of place than any of the other cities I'd lived in, even New York and London and Jerusalem, but certainly different than Birmingham and Austin. But yeah, we've really enjoyed being in Miami and raising our kids here. We think it's a great place. Again, I can talk a little bit about why it's so great for me in terms of running AJC, but on a personal level, it's been great as well.
So diving into the AJC, now I'm glad that we can talk a little bit about why Miami is important for you, which is good because we want our listeners to know that Miami is a great place to do business, to grow your family, to build community. So the AJC is the Global Jewish Advocacy, right? That's the main mission of the AJC.
Well, so that's I would say more of a description of AJC. AJC is the leading global Jewish advocacy organization. We have unparalleled access to government officials, diplomats, world leaders, and through these relationships and our international presence, as well as our domestic presence, 22 offices in the United States, AJC is really able to have an impact on opinion and policy on issues that really matter, things like combating rising anti-Semitism and extremism, defending Israel's place in the world, safeguarding the rights and freedoms of all people. And that really is sort of the basis also of our mission, which, is essentially to, advocate for and enhance the well-being of Jewish people around the world, defend Israel's right to peace and security, and to advance democratic values and human rights for everyone.
What can we dive into them a little bit?
Absolutely.
Can we start with combating the rising anti-Semitism and extremism?
Certainly. It's unfortunately the Jewish people have been subjected over millennia to different forms of hatred. And, unfortunately, in our own time, we're again witnessing increasing divisions in our own society and of course, in Europe and in other places, and the fraying of social fabric. And it's, of course, at a time when we all need to be pulling together as a nation and as a world. And unfortunately, we're confronting hate directed at the Jewish community, as well as hate directed at other communities. And that's AJC's really one of the fundamental premises of our work, which is, we know as a Jewish community, we have to stand up for ourselves and for Jewish brothers and sisters all over the world. But we also know that our fate is linked directly to the fate of other minorities. And so as we see any form of persecution, bigotry, aimed at different communities, we know that we have to speak out and speak up. And that's what we've done since our founding in 1906. So we're an organization that's been around for 114 years and really played a role in many of the important outcomes as it relates to human rights and advocacy on behalf of the Jewish community. And so I think the need is as great now as it ever has been. So we're working in many ways to tackle the issues that we're seeing, this surge in hate and the surge in anti-Semitism, coming from various sources, including the far right, the far left, extremist ideologies. So, we really believe that, it's something that we have to face as a society. We have to help our allies and friends when they are being confronted with challenges and hate directed at their community. So, that's really where AJC's one of AJC's main areas of focus right now.
How can people listening get involved? If it could be a Jewish person listening, this maybe interested in Miami, or somebody in Miami living already, or just maybe students interested in human rights. Is there a particular way people could reach out and get involved, or what are some things that people can do on their own to contribute to these initiatives?
Sure. Well, so number one, I encourage everyone to go to our website, ajc.org. Learn a little bit about the work that's been done and is being done. Even before coronavirus, we were seeing attacks against Jewish communities. And now during coronavirus, there's even more sort of conspiracy theories. So it is a good time for people to learn, to get involved. One way they can do that, and they'll see this on our website, is we host regular conversations with world leaders and experts. It's through something we call AJC Advocacy Anywhere. So we've hosted sessions, Zoom sessions with leaders from all over the world, all over Europe, the Gulf, the Persian Gulf, really throughout Latin America. So it's a great way to learn about international affairs and issues that are happening broadly, and specifically on issues relating to Jewish communities, to Israel, but also on issues of democracy and human rights. So I would encourage everyone to look at those opportunities to learn, because I think, getting different perspectives and learning is for sure the first step. And then, of course, we welcome involvement. We work with allies from different communities. We have a Muslim Jewish Advisory Council. We work with our friends and partners in the Muslim community who've also been subject to bigotry and hate. We've do work building relations with the African American community, with the Latino community, really trying to find that common ground, but also just learn about each other and get to know each other. It's a really important part of what we do. And so I would certainly welcome anyone who wants to learn more.
Thank you. Thank you for letting us how we can contribute. Continuing talking about human rights, I was reading some of the information you provided. Thank you very much, by the way. Can you tell us the story of Governor George Wallace? It was it was one of the articles you shared with me that you wrote, and your father had a role there as well.
Well, so yeah, this especially now when in the wake of the May 25th killing of George Floyd and the reckoning, the sort of looking back and trying to understand how we got to where we are, and dealing with issues of racism, that we are now trying to better understand our history. And as we look at our history, the only way you understand that is hearing stories, reading. And I encourage everyone to go back and try and understand, especially in the civil rights movement. And we've seen in recent days with the passing of Congressman John Lewis, really these incredible legacies of people who've made our country a better place, but who have endured, a lot of struggle. And so I grew up, as I said, in Birmingham and learning about the civil rights movement from my parents. And in particular, my dad, both my parents went to the University of Alabama, and they were there in the early 1960s. And my father was involved in student government. He had grown up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where the University of Alabama is. And the university, like many, was segregated. And so in order to desegregate, two very brave students, African American, enrolled in the university. And at that time, the governor of Alabama declared that he was not going to allow the university to be desegregated. And he stood and he promised to do this, and he did stand in the schoolhouse door to try and stop it from happening. And the president called in the National Guard to show that he would not allow the governor to stop this from happening, that it was the right thing to do, and that it was the right thing to do to remove him from trying to stop this from happening. And my father, at the time, involved in student government and ultimately became president of student government at the University of Alabama. He was involved in going around the campus to tell student groups, this is going to happen. And unlike other Southern universities that created a violent scene when their schools were desegregated, University of Alabama should not be the laughingstock of the nation. It should really be on the right side of history. And that is how it happened. And the fact that it was peaceful, that's not to mean it was as easy, and especially for those brave students. Definitely. But in terms of the actual desegregation, it happened, and the folks, no one rioted, no one created an incident, and so the president, President Kennedy, even acknowledged the students at the university for that. And my dad always really was honored by that, because he felt that in some small way, he had played a role. And when he went on to become the president of student government, people knew he had been involved in that effort. So he felt that was somewhat of a vote of confidence in the desegregation.
The federal government had already declared that segregation was not something to be allowed anymore across the states, right? But the governor was pushing for it regardless.
That's correct. The Supreme Court had already, ruled in Brown versus Board, that separate but equal is not constitutional, and so I think that this is one of those episodes in history that we have to learn from. We have to remember, those brave people who stood up and who really made a difference. And I think, again, we're at this really important point of talking about these issues and listening and trying to understand how we can be effective in helping our country to realize the vision of America as a place of equality and justice. So I think these are important, historical lessons to learn, and I certainly take them, into mind when I'm doing the work that I do, because, my work involves building coalitions and alliances. And, there's a saying that we have at AJC, which is, if you want to have a friend, you have to be a friend. And that means in times of need, we reach out and we help those in other communities, and we help our friends because it's the right thing to do. And because if you expect others to want to learn about your concerns and your issues, you have to show that same willingness.
During one of the, talking about reaching out, during one of the hurricanes, you guys reached out and helped out a couple of communities. Or am I mistaken? Did I misread?
No, you're exactly right. This was after Hurricane Katrina. It's one of the other things that attracted me to AJC was this understanding that in these really difficult times around the world, we need to help others in providing assistance and aid. It's also why I'm still involved in issues related to U.S. Global leadership, and especially on issues of development and diplomacy, because I really do think it represents the best of the United States, and I think it's something where our leadership is indispensable. And in this particular case of Hurricane Katrina, our CEO knew that I had family through my wife in New Orleans, and so he appointed me to be our Hurricane Katrina relief coordinator. And we visited the region, many times, and met with leaders in the Jewish community and the Christian community, and we ended up raising over $1 million and distributing it evenly between Jewish institutions and Christian institutions and 2 historically Black colleges, Xavier and Dillard University. And it was just a terrific experience for me early in my career at AJC, and it was hands-on. And we ended up, not just allocating the funds, but taking several groups of young professionals in the Jewish community from all over the country to New Orleans to do relief work and to meet with leaders in the African American community at Xavier and Dillard universities to build those relationships. So it really was a great experience, and I think a great example of the type of work that we do, which is we stand with our friends and our potential friends in really hard times, and in particular cities like New Orleans and Miami. I think that this bill as well, very ecumenical and very where you have people of different faiths having really strong relationships and connections, and we wanted to foster that sense, and that was really a great opportunity.
So you were boots on the ground over in New Orleans.
We did. We brought I think 4 or 5 different groups over a year and a half, 2-year period to do cleanup work, and certainly we weren't there day in, day out, whereas a lot of other groups were. But we tried to play our part in showing that we cared and supporting those people who really were the ones who were there, on a constant basis and trying to bring the city back to life. So we were happy to play the role we did.
Is there any experience or something that impacted you when you were there the most out of your entire experience? When you're in an area that's been devastated like that, and you see how it impacts people's lives, it really does leave an impression on you. And even my wife's grandmother's home, which had 8 feet of water, going to see that, and then to see the devastation just wrought on such a large scope, and realize that there's real lives, and meeting with the people whose lives had been devastated, and then trying to find ways to help them, and seeing synagogues and churches that also had been really just completely destroyed by the flooding. It fills you with a sense of compassion and a sense of really sadness, but at the same time, it also inspires hope, because you see these really resilient, amazing people who would do anything to bring their congregation back and their institutions and houses of worship back, knowing that those are central places for community and society. So that's what I would say is, just seeing how real lives were impacted and seeing the bravery and resilience of the community. Well, you were definitely doing God's work there. I mean, there's nothing more fulfilling than helping another human being through their troubles. So it must have been a very fulfilling experience.
Absolutely. And one that, really guided my path in terms of wanting to focus on reaching out to other communities, wanting to be helpful, whenever and wherever we could be.
So one of the other pillars that we mentioned at the beginning was defending Israel's position in the world, right? Place in the world. How is one of the ways that the AJC accomplishes that?
Sure. Well, we do that in a number of ways, and a lot of it is, talking with government officials from around the world and helping them to understand the complexities of the issues and the history, which are all really important, and a lot of times are left out, and there's not a lot of context for what you hear about Israel in the media. And so, one of the ways that we do that directly is taking leaders from different fields to Israel on AJC's Project Interchange. And this is a 1-week experience where, people see for themselves the complexity of Israel and the region in which it finds itself. And this is a warts and all kind of approach. We try and, in that small amount of time, expose people to different narratives, different backgrounds, so they hear from Israeli officials, but we also take them to meet with leaders of the Palestinian Authority. We take them to meet with leaders from lots of different walks of life and communities, because the idea is that Israel is a democracy, and Israel doesn't do everything right, just like the United States doesn't do everything right, but that it's really an amazing place, and for the Jewish community, it's it's our national home, and so we want people to get a sense of the place and the people and the variety and diversity. And so I've been fortunate to take about 9 different groups, several groups of Rhodes Scholars from Oxford, and for the past 5 years, taking several delegations funded by the Knight Foundation of technology entrepreneurs to learn about Israel and really the amazing work it's done as the startup nation, the name that it's been given for the incredible innovation and technology ecosystem that it's built. And so we've taken people from South Florida who are starting their own companies, startup companies, technology companies, venture capitalists, and others, so they can learn best practices and develop relationships with their counterparts in Israel. But we also, again, want them to learn about the region and to learn about the complexities that exist, so they can really have a better understanding. Beyond that, a lot of our conversations here in Miami and in our 22 other offices around the U.S. and in our offices around the world, are with government leaders, diplomats, to help them understand our perspective on Israel and on other key issues, but also to listen. We understand that our perspective is not the only one, and we need to hear what others are saying. And I think that's why AJC has credibility around the world in terms of our access to world leaders and our influence on the issues, because we know that diplomacy and advocacy are not a one-way street. They are, it's very much about developing that relationship, and that is not about scoring points. That is about listening and responding to people's real concerns and thoughts. So I think we do that here in Miami. We do that in our other offices. We do that when the United Nations meets in New York. We do that with ambassadors in Washington, D.C. and in world capitals. So I'm always happy to play my role here in South Florida, along with my board of directors. We take regular meetings with the amazing diplomats that are stationed here in South Florida.
Does your office work closely with the Israeli consulate in Miami?
We do. I mean, I would say we work closely with many different consulates. In fact, I just had an op-ed a week ago in the Miami Herald with the German Consul General talking about the need for a working definition of anti-Semitism to be adopted more broadly. But to your question, absolutely. We do have regular conversations with the Israeli consulate here. I just spoke on a webinar that they did with the Deputy Consul General. But certainly we talk and we have we're not connected in any way formally, but we certainly have some joint interests and have worked together on a number of different issues.
I'm glad that you touched on technology because I know that we're running out of time, but I wanted to quickly also mention tech because when I was working in the international relations for the city of Miami, we work a lot with the consulate, with the Israeli consulate. They were reached out for a lot of things, and we developed a great friendship at a personal level and at a professional level. And also there was an interesting opportunity to work with our organization called Local Tau. I don't know if you heard about Local Tau.
Sure. That's Tel Aviv University, of course.
Yes. And they actually invited the director of public works and one of our resilient team members to partake in a judging panel for startups, local startups, providing solutions for city issues. And I think they were working, if I'm not mistaken, with the city of Miami Beach at the time for an issue that they were proposing to solve.
Oh, that's terrific. I think those are, there's more and more collaborations, and I think those are so key. And again, one of the outcomes of these delegations we've taken to Israel on Project Interchange, we've seen relationship between Miami-Dade College and their Idea Center with Tel Aviv University. We've seen Florida International University developing relationships with Israeli institutions. Same thing for the University of Miami. And really, these connections are what it's all about, because ultimately, the knowledge that we can share and the best practices really will benefit, both Israel and Florida and Miami in particular. And so this work is going to continue. We're going to continue to take delegations of technology entrepreneurs to Israel. We're going to continue to try and take some of the best thinking and best practices and experts from Israel and bring them here virtually for now, but hopefully in person in the not too distant future. And I think it is something unique. Miami is growing in this field of innovation, and so we're happy to play a small part in helping bridge that connection.
Awesome. So can we also let startups know that they can reach out to the AJC if they're interested in connecting with Israel and with the Jewish community and stuff like that?
Absolutely. We'd love to hear, what people are working on and be helpful however we can.
Great. Well, Brian, thank you so much for joining us. It's been great talking to you and learning about the AJC and what you guys do and how people can contribute and all the great work you guys do.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. It's really an important time to have this conversation. It's a very polarized time, but it's a time when we know we have to be working together. We have to get through this time of coronavirus. We have to get through this time of increased tensions and hatred directed at different communities. And so, that's really where AJC stands and we'll continue to fight the good fight. And, Miami is a terrific place to do this. I think we can be a model for the rest of the country and the rest of the world because we are so diverse and because we do have people who care about each other. So Absolutely. Thank you for bringing me on to the show, and I look forward to having many more conversations with you.
Same here. Same here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.